This is First Encounter, a podcast exploring both the foundations and the future of historical romance. Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Encounter. I am Andie James, a historical romance enthusiast and author. And I'm really excited today because we are joined by Harper St. George for our author interview for the month of June. And I just love her books, and I'm thrilled that she is here. Welcome, Harper.
Hey, Andie, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on a brand new podcast that's celebrating historical romance.
Yes, everyone here loves historical romance, so we're fighting for our life a little bit, but you know what? We're here. We're here. There's core people who love it. Yeah, but I am super excited to have you. Harper St. George grew up in rural Alabama and along Florida's Forgotten Coast, where stories of the past sparked her lifelong love of history, romance, and adventure. Love that. We all love that. By high school, she discovered historical romance novels, excellent, which brought all of those elements together in one irresistible package. She's been hooked ever since. Today, Harper lives in the Atlanta area where she writes historical romance set from the Viking era to the Gilded Age. Her novels have been translated into 10 languages. Wow, that's impressive. And featured in major publications, including Entertainment Weekly, People Magazine, Oprah Daily, wow, Women's World, Forbes, Pop Sugar, and Bustle. She has also received the prestigious honor of having her book selected for the Book of the Month Club. Wow, that's great. And BuzzFeed Best Romance of the Year. That's super impressive. As someone who's only self-published and only has 5 books out, that's like, we can only aspire.
Yeah, well, you got to have a lot of books out before.
Yes.
It takes a while to get traction. And I also want to clarify from the bio, it was actually 6th grade I discovered historical romance. But I don't want to put that in my bio.
I know. I understand.
It sounds better if you say high school.
And we all read 1 or 2 in middle school and high school.
Yes.
Or more,
Yeah.
But, well, that's actually a great place to start because obviously, I mean, your bio showed how you were kind of primed to love historical romance.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you get into it? How did you find those first books? What were some of those first books? What made you fall in love with this genre?
The very first book I read was Autumn Dove by Sylvie, I think it's F. Sommerfeld. I haven't read many. I don't know if she wrote a lot of books, but that's like the first one I read. And it's because my best friend in 6th grade had stolen it from her sister's stash of romance. And
I love that.
Her older sister. And so she would read it and she would every day come to school and she would be like, I have to tell you about this book I'm reading. So over lunch, she would tell me little snippets. And by the end of the first week, I'm like, tell me more. What's happening? And she just went on, and she was, we were 6th grade. She couldn't read every day. She was a slow reader, and I'm like, give me this book, hurry up. And so I read it after her over the summer, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is everything. It's got romance, adventure, because that was a Western for sure. And I really started with the historical Westerns because you have that, the Wild West.
Yes.
Sort of tall tales. Anything can happen there, So that was my entry into it. And then from there, Joanna Lindsay, Julie Garwood, Judith I still reread her books to this day. Whitney, My Love, and Something Wonderful, and all of those. And just from there, I started reading more historical. I did read some contemporary, but I come back to historical because I just love history. I mean, if I could go back to college to do anything, it'd probably just be history, majoring in history, and I'd be a history professor or something somewhere.
Yeah, I think, looking back, maybe I should have done that too. I don't know. I always took history classes anyways, and I personally majored in religion and minored in political science. So there's a lot of history woven into all that anyways.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know. That's great. And you mentioned Julie Garwood, so I'll just shout out for everyone listening. The book that we are featuring on the podcast this month, so it'll come out 2 weeks from today, that episode. We're doing The Bride by Julie Garwood, and I'll be talking about that with Jen Prokop from Fated Mates. So I'm really excited about that because I've not read it, and I know it's like this classic of the
It's
genre.
sort of canon for historical
It
romance.
is. I know. So I'm very excited to read it. So shout out to Julie Garwood there. But well, and you mentioned Westerns, which I think, I mean, they used to be pretty prolific. And I know people still write them, but I feel like they're not the thing right now.
No, I mean, is anything in historical romance
Well,
the thing besides Regency, maybe, you know?
that's true. I know. Well, I know, but I write Regency and we get lost in the masses too. So I
Yeah,
mean,
it's true. It's true.
it's there's no good option here. We just love
I
what
know.
we love and we go with it. But I know one of the questions I asked you kind of in preparation for this cuz I just want to lift things up for people. I asked if you had a book that you wish got more attention or people talked about more. And you mentioned one of the books in your Westerns, in your Gilded Age Westerns called The Copper Heir. So why
Mhm.
don't you tell us a little bit more about that whole series? Why do you want to uplift this and how is this different? Tell us about the West and the Gilded Age.
Sure. So I love that series is
Hmm.
set in Helena, Montana, right before Montana became Montana. It was still a territory, Montana Territory at that time. And people don't realize they think of the Gilded Age and they think of sort of New York,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, real industrial areas.
Yes.
And for people who don't know, the Gilded Age is roughly like 1870 to 1900. Some people put it all the way up to the First World War, but that's a good, well, maybe 1865, right after the Civil War. That's a
Yeah.
good like 30-35 year range
Yes.
where we were just in this really, industry had just exploded.
Hmm.
The industrial age, factories, steel production, railroads
Railroads. Yeah.
had just sort of exploded. So you had all of these people who were maybe lower class or middle class before, not the typical upper class, just making boatloads of money, becoming millionaires almost overnight. The stock market was really getting started. So you had the first like Wall Street bros were in the 1870s. So you had all of that money, and then you still had the Wild West. Of course, the Wild West was maybe St. Louis then, it wasn't as far west
Right.
as we think. But, you did have people going to San Francisco. The first Continental Railroad that you could go all the way from New York to San Francisco was in
Hmm.
1869. So that fed a lot of people moving that way. And so you had this real juxtaposition in the West of like these rural areas who had nothing. And then you had these cities like Helena, Montana, where they had, at
Hmm.
that point in time in the 1880s when I wrote my story, more millionaires per capita than anywhere else in the world
Crazy.
because you had mines, copper
Yeah.
mines, silver mines,
Hmm.
all that happening there. And so it was just a really interesting place to me because the reason I like the Gilded Age in general is because you have the glitz and the glamour, but
Hmm.
you also have all these social issues happening. Women's rights, workers' rights. You had the Jim
Hmm.
Crow laws starting then. So you had all this social activity and unrest and just people who are really, really without a lot of things, but you have this glittering ballrooms and you have electricity finally,
Yes.
you know? And
Literal
so
glittering.
I love that juxtaposition. I,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting stories
Hmm.
that come out of a situation like that, where in Regency, it's a little more pastoral.
Yes.
It's
Hmm.
pre-trains. Everybody, you just picture the Jane Austen heroines walking everywhere,
Yeah.
and it just seems a little calmer, which
Hmm.
I love reading about. But for writing and research, I love when I can dig into a time that has a lot of stuff
Yeah.
going on.
Well, it's ripe for it. I mean, there's so much that goes on at that time. And I mean, the I feel like Gilded Age was having a moment a little bit because the HBO put out the show The Gilded Age.
For sure.
um and of course I watched it because it's me. I love historical drama, period
It's a
dramas and
good
all that.
show.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great show. I also love Broadway and it's like filthy with Broadway stars, so that's great.
Mhm, mhm.
um but yeah, it was interesting because the first few seasons I felt like it was kind of quiet and then like for some reason in season 3 all of a sudden it got all this attention and people were talking about it. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is great. Let's put attention on this. But
Yeah.
and I think part of it is just, to me, it feels like our current period, there's a lot of mirrors, I would say,
Oh, for sure.
to the Gilded Age. And
Mhm.
Joanna Shoup is, famously also writes Gilded Age, and she's been definitely doing a lot of posting about some similarities between
Mhm, mhm.
occurrences in the Gilded Age and our current chapter here and where we're at with just change in economics. And, we could argue that maybe you were talking about the original kind of like, I don't know what you said, but now we have kind of the tech bros, right? And
Oh,
then they're
yeah, the Wall Street Bros, yeah.
yeah, Wall Street, there you go, right? And so we have the people that are kind of really able to capitalize and our economy's just changed so much. So it's really interesting. But
Yeah.
so how did you let me back up a step. I'm getting ahead of myself because you said Western and I just went off. But so you've been reading for a long time, this genre. How did you get into writing it? Or is writing something you always knew you wanted to do, or how did that all happen?
That's a good question because I guess it was in 7th and 8th grade. I had the same English teacher both years, and she had us actually write a lot,
Yeah.
poetry, stories, short stories.
Yeah.
And my stories eventually became chapter one, chapter two. They were just all linking together because
Yeah.
I'm terrible at short stories. I can't just end it. I'm like, I gotta know what happens next. And she was okay with that. But then also, we had to every Friday get in a circle on the carpet,
Mhm.
crisscross applesauce, and read our stories out loud.
Terrifying.
For like a 7th grader, I thought it was torture. But then I remember seeing people like lean forward, listening, wanting to know what
Mhm.
happens, asking questions. And then sometimes we would have to critique each other's papers. We'd pass them around. And I remember getting feedback like, I really care about this character. I want to know
Mhm.
what happens. And that for me, I think sparked like, oh, I can really reach people. It's not just about
Mhm.
writing for myself, but it's that writing for a reader, which is sort of the key for me. It sparks my creativity. Like, "Ooh, I hope they like this. I'm gonna do this. What are they gonna think of this?" It's sort of you're writing for someone, as much as you're writing for yourself. And so that sparked that for me.
Yeah.
And, in high school, I started writing with my friend who actually, was reading historical romance with me, and we would each have a book, and we would be, like, the heroine in the book.
Yes,
And
of
we
course.
would write that part, and then we would like, between classes, we would trade the notebook back and forth, and so it
So
kind of
fun.
grew organically. We didn't really plot or plan. We were just sort of reacting to what the other person had written, and I think we wrote about 6 books that way through high school. I
Oh
mean,
my
totally
gosh.
unpublishable, not
Yeah,
good
yeah,
books,
but that's so fun.
but fun, and that to me was like, "Oh gosh, I wanna do this myself." But then I went to college and I'm like, obviously writing romance novels is not a job you could really have, you know? So I got away from it, but the stories just kept it's like a pressure in
Mhm.
your brain. They're in there and
Yeah.
they gotta come out somehow. So I'd write a little here and there, but I never really finished anything or wrote more than a couple chapters.
Mhm.
And then my oldest daughter was born and I decided to stay home for a little while
Mhm.
with her instead of going back to work. And it just hit me like, if I don't write now, when am I going to? I'm gonna have to wait till
Mhm.
I retire, which is fine, but I really just wanted to do it before then, you know?
Yeah.
So that's sort of when I started writing to actually with an eye on publishing something.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it, and now you've got so many great books.
Yeah. Well, it still took a while before I published because the first book I wrote, there was this little group in downtown Atlanta that I went to, and there was an editor there, and she was like, "Well, I can edit." I mean, she edited, but it's more like a critique, and it
Mhm.
was really cheap. And I gave it to her, and she was so amazing. She did a great job. She tore it apart. She actually got halfway through and was like, "I'm gonna stop here because if you take my suggestions, the whole second part's gonna
It'll be
change."
different.
And I was like, "Oh my god, she hated it." But, it was like a creative writing class because the feedback she gave me, at
Mhm.
least with GMC, goal, motivation, conflict, and lining those up so it's actually coherent was just amazing. Like I said, it was
Yeah,
like a creative writing class, and
that's
once
great.
I had that feedback, I felt like, "Okay, I'm ready now to write for real." And so I never published that book, and that was like a young adult, paranormal. And I was like, "I'm gonna do romance because that's what I wanna do, historical romance." So I did a Western novella where she was a bank robber,
Nice.
Gilded Age because she was from Boston originally, but out west because his family had somehow swindled her family out of their fortune, so she was robbing his family's banks to get her money back. And that's why I love westerns because you can do just crazy things like
You
that
can
would
do
not
crazy things.
happen because you had the outlaws and
Yeah.
then you had the respectable civilized towns where,
Yeah.
everybody went to church and had printed newspapers, but then you had this whole other side of it,
Mhm. Yeah.
That was fun.
Well, your more recent series kind of show a little bit more of like the clash between those two
Mm,
because you have your American heiresses traveling to England to find their respectable husbands. So you really can see kind of some of that difference in kind of the wilder, freer, less socially rigid Americans versus people stepping into that social class system within
yeah.
England, which just creates some delicious differences, which we just love. Like, it's great. And so your latest series, The Doves of New York, I just read all three of them in the last few
Oh,
weeks,
thank
and
you.
they're fantastic. I was so excited. I was waiting for the final book to come out. It just came out last week at the time we're
Mhm.
recording this. But everyone, it's out now. Brand new book. It is so good. The Dove and the Rogue.
I should s
Yes, there you go. It is available. She's holding it up if you're listening. And I will link that in our show notes where you can go to find that, as well as, your website, newsletter sign up, all that good stuff. So you can find everything you need to about Harper as you listen. But it is so good. And I finished the previous book, Eliza and the Duke, about a week before that came out. And I was like waiting. I was waiting because I just knew you set it up so deliciously of like
Mhm.
this couple that's coming throughout. So it follows three sisters, the Dove sisters, and it's quite I'm telling you the story of your own books, but they are illegitimate, we find out very quickly in the prologue, I guess, of the first book. So no spoilers here, but
Right. Yeah.
we find this out, and their paternal grandmother, who they never really like knew, but I mean they knew of her, but she has
Mhm.
died, and she knows that they are her son's actual children, and has left them an inheritance, quite substantial inheritance, one I'd still like to receive today, let alone
Oh,
what it
for
was worth
sure.
back then. Yeah, but there's kind of their father has put some conditions on this, like one, he's not willing to acknowledge them, right? Because that would just ruin his image. But he really is like, well, in order to get this inheritance, it was a condition that they marry, but like he wants it to be someone he approves of because he's looking for some connections.
Exactly.
So they come up with this scheme. Well, really, the eldest sister comes up with a scheme to go to England and find lords that because he would approve of that. And so the three-book series follows each sister as they embark upon finding these men. And it's interesting because two of these books, the first and the third, so The Stranger I Wed and then The Dove and the Rogue, are both married to comedians, but in totally different
Yeah.
ways. Like you write them like the setup's different, the feeling's different, the way they're involved with each other is different, and it's just great because I love a good marriage of convenience. And the middle book, Eliza and the Duke, is the youngest sister Eliza's story, and she just kind of goes a little rogue. She
Yeah, it's
finds a
more of a
different.
forbidden romance because she finds
Mhm.
sort of a
Yes.
commoner, so to speak,
Yes.
and
She
she doesn't marry her lord that she's supposed to
yeah.
marry. So
The plan isn't working for her very well because she has interest elsewhere. But they're all so great. I really, really love them. I was so excited for Jenny and David's story in the final book because we've met them throughout the other books.
so yeah,
So we're
he's
ready
been
for their
after Jenny
story.
for a while.
Yes, yes, we're ready for their story when it comes about. And they just, as Sarah McLean always says on Fated Mates, they're just two dum-dums who don't want to
Yeah,
acknowledge their feelings, even though they're obviously, well, first of all, they have like sizzling chemistry together, and that they acknowledge, but can't acknowledge anything beyond that, of course.
for people who haven't read it, I wanna say the setup, I know marrying for an inheritance is pretty canon in historical romance and romance overall, I would say, because you can still
Mhm.
find it in contemporary. But it works here because during the Gilded Age, you had all
Mhm.
of these American heiresses. There were
Yes.
like 300 or so heiresses who sort of went to Europe to find husbands because they were from this class of people who had made a ton of money in the Industrial Revolution, but they had no social connections. And of course, the old money families in New York and Philadelphia and Boston did not want this riffraff in their ranks
Of course
because
not.
how dare they? They'd been here for 200 years already with their money. I mean, it's not really an uncommon American phenomenon where, you kind of close ranks. And so these families, to gain social acceptance and cachet and connections, married their daughters off to impoverished aristocrats in Europe.
Yes.
A lot of them married into the English aristocracy because at this point, a lot of those families had lost their money because of the Industrial Revolution. People were moving to cities and working in factories, and they were sort of land-based fortunes. So the value of the land was going down because they weren't farming as much, because you could actually import, some grains and corn and things like that cheaper than you could actually grow it in England at the time. So they were all ripe for these marriages. Actually, Princess Diana's great-great-grandmother or great-grandmother, I don't know, one of the greats was one of these. Frances Work, she was one of these women who married an American who married into the aristocracy.
That's great.
So there's that
That's
connection.
great.
And Winston Churchill's mom was actually one of the first.
Yeah.
So, you had a lot of these
Yeah.
marriages happening. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why this makes sense that their father would be like, well, want your
Totally makes sense. I know. And I
yeah, you're
believe that was actually the setup in Downton Abbey as well.
yeah,
I think that, like
yeah.
Cora was the
Mhm.
wealthy
She
American who
was the
married.
wealthy American, yeah.
Yes. But, yeah. So, no, I mean, totally. Yeah, the way in which everything was changing economically in England because of the Industrial Revolution, as you said, like, it was really leaving, I mean, those lords in the dust if they weren't willing to adapt. But then there was also, for so long, and maybe we exaggerate this in our books because, like I said, I write Regency, but there's, always that attitude of like, well, gentleman can't work. That's just beneath him. And so it's
Right.
like, if you didn't get over that mindset in time to like invest in some other ways and change things up, you were getting left behind. So,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't want to get ahead, but in The Dove and the Rogue, the heroine is an opera singer,
Yes.
and that's all she wants to do. She doesn't want to marry
Mhm.
for money because what lord is going to let her continue to be an opera singer? Because, they were sort of
Yeah.
looked down on
Yeah.
socially.
It's
As
almost like being an
almost like,
actress, right? Oh,
which is almost like being a prostitute.
right.
So,
Right.
but it was sort of based or inspired, well, not based, inspired by a real opera singer who married a duke's heir in the 1890s. They did not have a happily ever after because they divorced after about 10 years. But he was, oh, I forgot his name. But anyway, Hope was his last name. He owned the Hope Diamond, which, we
The Hope
saw in
Diamond.
Titanic. And
Yeah.
he actually had to sell it because he needed the money because his family just, they had no means of income other than tenant farming, which
Yeah.
was not really a good way to make money anymore, to earn money.
Well, you mentioned divorce. You actually, I mean, of course, it doesn't happen in these books because they're romances.
Exactly.
We know they're going to be happy together in the end. But it's interesting because, as I said, kind of the first and third book, even though it approaches them very differently, they do have marriage of convenience. And both of the sisters kind of going into this were like, we'll divorce in like 2 years. Like, don't
Yeah,
worry. This is, you'll get your money. I'll get what I need. And then we'll peace out. Right. Like,
right.
and it was still pretty controversial at the time. I mean, it happened, obviously, but it was still not, you know, quite the scandal. But I guess they didn't care at this point. So,
I mean, I think it happened a lot more than we think it does because I've read a lot of newspapers from the Victorian
mhm,
era, the Gilded Age, and you do have a lot of people divorcing. And for
mhm.
ridiculous reasons, like she likes her cats more than me, just
That would be
incompatibility
me.
reasons. It happens a lot. It just didn't happen as much with the upper class.
Mhm.
You know, the working people were divorcing. There's one lady I researched because I wanted to write about her. She's from a family of, I think, 5. Every one of them had divorced. So if you didn't care about your social standing,
Mhm.
it was certainly an option. And some states made it a lot easier than others, for sure. But in the UK, especially if you were a lord, you would
Mhm.
have to go through Parliament to do that, which
Yes.
was a little bit more
Mhm.
of a, it stopped that from happening as much. They would mainly just live apart,
Right.
rather than be legally divorced. But,
Mhm.
the sisters coming from America, I think they viewed divorce a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And also, like, they didn't really care about their social standing. It was their biological father,
Right.
because their mom was an actress.
Yes.
Not that she was able to be an actress after
Mhm.
meeting her biological father, but,
Yeah.
I just think they just wanted their money to live happily ever after on their own.
Yeah. Like, this will set me up. I can be comfortable. I can do my own thing. So let's do what we
Exactly.
need to do to get this, and then
Yes.
we'll move on.
Yes.
Like,
And it's like I can sign my own contracts because that comes up in Jenny's book where she has to
yes.
have him sign her contract because
Yes.
they lost their autonomy when
Mhm.
they were not even like legally a person of their own
Right.
when they
Yeah.
married because he had to sign everything for them. He had to set up their bank accounts and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. It was great. And, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to including political stuff. And you
Hmm.
definitely, in the first book, he's very active in Parliament. I love it.
Yeah.
But no,
I
it's
had a
great.
hard time writing that because I don't
Yeah.
like to write politicians. And obviously
Well, I know.
politics comes
We're always
into the
writing them as these great men wanting to do good reform.
But I really don't like that research either because I'm just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Just do what you're supposed to do. Why do we have" and I think Dave might that came through in David's point of view because his brother is pretty much an avowed bachelor because he has a partner who's
Yes.
male,
I
and
loved that you included that. Yeah.
he's never gonna get married, never gonna have children, so David knows he's gonna have to assume that role and that seat in Parliament one day, and he sort of does not want to,
It doesn't want
because
it.
who wants to go into politics, really? And
Some
he's like,
people do, some people don't.
"I know." And he's like, why do we have to have all these speeches and all these dinners and all these conversations? Just do the right thing, for God's sakes, and we don't have to
Just
do all this
what's
talking
right,
about
just do it. I love that. I love
it.
that. But well, so the deal with your new series though, we got to get into the behind the scenes a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because most of your books have been traditionally published. I think
Mhm.
you just recently, correct me if I'm wrong, but you re-released your Western series on your own. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was published about a little over 10 years ago,
Okay.
with Harlequin.
With Harlequin.
And, oh gosh, unfortunately, they are closing their
I
historical
know.
line altogether. But at the time I got my rights back,
Hmm.
they were still doing European set historicals.
Yes.
So they gave me back the rights to the American
Hmm.
set historicals, which I republished, and that's the
Yeah.
Copper Heir, the
Yes.
Bastard Heir, and the Gilded Lady, that whole series.
Yeah, I remember that recently you kind of re-released
Mhm.
those. So that's
Yeah.
great. But you were working with a publishing house and you'd planned this 3-book series because it's all
Mhm.
set up from the first, right?
Mhm.
These 3
Mhm.
sisters and we meet some of the people. And then kind of I remember reading this and just being aghast, but they just kind of informed you they would not be continuing the series after book 2.
Yeah, because book 2 was sort of the end of the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they didn't renew that. Obviously, you can talk more about that. And then it's like you still have this 3rd book. So thank goodness you released it on your own. You self-published this book. It came out May 26th. But what's going on right now in
I
traditional
don't know.
publishing?
I
And
wish I knew.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I can't say they're totally moving away from
Hmm.
historical, but even Liana De La Rosa, who was with my same
Hmm.
publisher, Elizabeth Everett,
Hmm.
they're having to pivot to, I think
Yes.
Elizabeth's doing like a cozy
She's,
romantasy,
yes.
and
Hmm.
Liana's doing
A
I think
contemporary.
a rom-com, contemporary
Hmm.
rom-com. So, yeah, it's really sad. We just kinda all got the news kind of around the same time that they're just not gonna continue with historical
Hmm.
romance overall. And that's not to say there's not gonna be any historical
Yeah.
romance, so, in trad, but it's definitely pulled back, and it's just because I think mass market was where historical romance really shined
Mm.
because it was the right price point, and now we've moved to most trad books are in the bigger size. So what size is that? Like the 8.5 by
Mhm.
5 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they've moved to that bigger size, which can be more than double,
Yeah.
honestly, the cost of a mass market.
Mhm.
And the reader base had been fed a steady diet of mass market books for
Mhm.
half the price. And so I just don't think they made the switch in readers, you know,
Mhm.
or they primed those readers. And honestly, it's a lot to pay $20 for a book when you were paying, less
Mhm.
than 10. And unfortunately, we're not seeing mass market shelf space anymore.
Right.
Walmart has switched out, and that was
Mhm.
sort of the last bastion of mass
Mhm.
market. Barnes& and Noble, they've switched
Mhm.
over to the bigger size for the most part. That helped lead to, I think, Harlequin Historical line closing because they
Mhm.
were still in Barnes& and Noble, at least, in some mass market sections, but a lot of Barnes& and Noble, you can't even find the mass market section anymore.
Mhm.
And so that's just sort of closing down, and I think that impacted historical romance a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think that was huge for sure. But it's interesting to me. I mean, I guess the people who are always going to be buying paperbacks are maybe different from people buying ebooks because I think there's still a huge reader base for the
oh,
genre. It's
absolutely.
just a lot of it
Absolutely.
has shifted online.
It's shifted to ebooks, and
Mhm.
I have no inside knowledge. I don't know why publishers just do not value ebook sales, even though I feel like they're more lucrative,
Mhm.
you know,
It's,
as they do trade sales.
yeah. You don't have production cost with an ebook,
I know,
and
yeah.
you can price that lower, and people will buy it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. I'm not inside the brains.
Well, and it's
Mm.
not like, it's not my editor, it's not any of the
Right.
marketing people I worked with there, they're all
Mhm.
great, and they're all, are big historical romance fans too.
Mhm.
So it's just for a business decision from,
Yeah.
Daddy Berkeley, as Elizabeth calls it.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's just really interesting to see what happens. And I understand they're operating from the perspective of business, and you have to an extent because you got to keep things operating. I
Exactly.
understand that. But I just feel like there's kind of a whole group of readers that they're just leaving behind that would continue to faithfully buy if they were producing. And so, I've always been I feel like they're trying to pursue new readers in the genre, and maybe that's where it's not happening, and I don't know. I don't know, but it's interesting to see some of the ways things have shifted. I feel like people who are still writing historical and being published right now, there's been a shift in tone in some books. It's first person, one
Yeah.
point of view from the heroine, which that's fine. We can change that stuff up. But I guess, there's a lot of emphasis on things other than the romance and the story, which again
Mhm.
is fine. We genre blend all the
Mhm.
time, but it really seems like trying to maybe appeal to new readers because it's more similar to kind of what's happening in contemporary romance right now. And I just fear that if I'm seeing people not enjoy it and be upset who are reading the genre like forever and love it like us. I just fear that if they are trying to appeal to new readers and they read that and like it, and then they go read the old stuff, they're not going to like the old stuff and they're not going to stick around.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's actually solving the problem. And in the meantime, we're leaving behind the faithful readers that were already reading historical romance. And I am not
Mhm.
opposed to evolving the genre. I mean, yes, like we always need to change, especially when it
Mhm.
comes to including more diversity of stories,
Right.
time, place, and whose stories we're telling for
Right.
sure.
And maybe stepping out of the ballroom a little bit
Yeah.
here and there.
Yeah, I think for sure, kind of expanding where stories are set, which time period we're focused on. Let's return to Westerns. Let's, go to France. Let's go wherever, And so I think there's lots of opportunity there to evolve the genre in different ways. But
I
I don't
think
know.
we're at a point where it's almost like, okay, we should evolve at some point in some
Mhm.
way, but how? So we
Yeah.
have to have books that kind of explore different
Mhm.
ways to kind of see
Mhm.
which way is the right way forward,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I don't know
And
what the answer is. I wish I did.
I don't know either. I don't know either. I mean, I just
My
I
crystal ball
don't
is working,
I know. I
unfortunately.
just don't want the genre to disappear. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. People know this is happening. Please support Besotted Books. Kickstarter's happening June 9th. But
Oh, cool. That's
yeah.
close.
So this is airing June 10th, so it just opened. So if you
Okay.
guys want to go, I'll put a link in the show notes. But yeah, so I am trying to start an indie publisher right now that's going to be exclusive to historical romance, and it's certainly not. I mean, we're not going to be like a trad pub. This isn't going to be because I
Still an
think
indie publisher.
yeah, I think stuff is happening in the indie and self-publishing realm where we do see that people are pushing the boundaries of the genre, right? They're
Mhm.
writing more diverse stories. They're writing stories that maybe aren't quite as mainstream. I have a lot of friends that are currently writing more like 20th century. We get a lot more LGBTQ. There's just a lot more happening. The problem is, how do you find those books?
Mhm.
Right? And that's
Mhm.
really an issue, because there isn't the same kind of pathways, I guess, to that traditional publishing has to get books known, talked about, discovered by those who would maybe review books, talk about them on different, TV shows, podcasts,
Well,
whatever.
yeah, because my first book, The Heiress Kiss the Duke, was Entertainment Weekly reviewed it.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
that's the book that got the Book of the Month Club selection.
Yeah.
So, you know, those avenues are kind of closed for the most part,
Mhm.
I think, to indie authors.
Yeah, and I don't know how this happened. Like, this will be someone other than me, but I would love to see, something like a book of the month club that's for indie,
Oh, yeah.
like
Mhm.
let's uplift other authors. Then it's how do you get that started? How do you get it
Yeah.
noticed? How do you, all
Yes.
of that. But
Julia Quinn, are you listening?
yeah, Julie Quinn, yeah, you can put some of these books in your stuff. Yeah, so I think and that's another thing. I think there are good things happening in historical. I think the people that love this genre are saying, "No, no, no, no. We're going to support this." And so the JQ editions giving the special treatment to some of these historical
Mhm.
romance books
Mhm.
that we
Mhm.
love. And then Fated Mates partnered with Adriana Herrera and Allie Hazelwood and
Right.
their project. And so they're releasing the Historical Trailblazers collection. By the time this airs, that Kickstarter will have closed, but I think they're selling after the fact. So you can still get in there if you want those books. But I love that we're uplifting these books because they're ones that are very important and classic to the genre. I love that we're recognizing them, we're giving them special treatment.
Mhm.
And while it brings attention to the genre and it's fantastic and I love it and I 100% support it and I can't wait to get my books, I don't know how much it's doing though to forward the genre
Right.
because we're still celebrating things that have already come. And
Right.
that's important. We need to know our foundations.
For
That's
sure.
part of the
Yeah.
reason I'm doing this podcast because I want to read some more of those classics I haven't read and
Mhm.
understand. But yeah, it's just interesting. So, what I'm trying to do, I guess, is find a way to allow some new authors a space because they're probably not going to get picked up by trad right now, right?
Right.
And
And I
so
will tell you, it can
yeah,
be really overwhelming publishing yourself. I mean, you're
it can be.
essentially a small business
Yeah.
publisher.
Well, how was that for you? Because you had to figure this out for this book. Like,
Yeah,
what
well,
did you do?
thankfully, I've been publishing since I think my first novella with Harlequin was out in 2014. So I've been in it a while, and I
Hmm.
sort of saw the writing on the wall for a long time. I
Yeah.
knew eventually I would at least be a hybrid, meaning some
Yes.
trad books and some
Yeah. So you're
self-published.
hybrid currently. Hmm.
Yeah, so now I am. So I was always taking classes. I'm in
Hmm.
NINC, which is short for Novelist Inc. It's an organization for self-published authors. And there's a conference every year. You can learn whatever you need to know. What do you use to format? How do you do
Hmm.
this? How do you do that? But
Hmm.
still doing it, even having that knowledge is kind of overwhelming.
It's a lot. I'm still learning, and I've put out 5 on my own now.
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
gotta schedule your cover designer, and it's
Hmm.
gotta be way in advance because 'cause they're
Hmm.
probably booked up. When are you gonna and then you have like, I'd always been good at working to deadlines, but now I'm
Hmm.
setting the deadlines myself,
Yeah.
and I don't know how long it takes me to write a book even though I've written 20 books, like, it depends,
It
so it's really
depends.
hard. because then you got to get your editor and then the proofreader
Yeah.
and all that. And always have a couple of people who've read most of my stuff, my
Mhm.
friends, they read my books beforehand.
Yes.
So I got to get it to them and then get it to an editor. So
Yeah.
it's just a lot if you're coming into it as a new author. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think you would
Mhm.
know how much, even if you
Yeah.
think you know, how much time.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot more time than you
It's
think.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Like, I'm always amazed at how much time I have to spend on, like, the business side of things. And the other thing is that self-publishing, in terms of the time, like we talked about, and just managing everything, but also the money, right? And so there are barriers to people being able to do that, even though people talk about, well, everyone can self-publish, it's great.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but if you wanna produce a book that is polished, edited, that people are gonna find, you do have
Mhm.
to invest some money in it. Not everyone's able to do that
Yeah.
because it takes a while to get a return on investment when you're an unknown
Oh,
name.
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's hard, and so I guess I don't know. I guess that's what I'm trying to do. We'll see if this works out or not. Hopefully we get funded, but basically, essentially, it's gonna be like self-publishing plus, like, we'll go through that process for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did wanna compliment you too, though, because I know, one of the things that people hate and they crow about and they're just like, "Ugh," is when, midway through a series, a publisher will, like, change the
Oh,
covers or the
yeah.
size or the whatever. You did such a good job
Yes.
with that cover matching. It's so close. It fits in. I know it's not, like, exact, but it fits in so well. It's so
Yes.
beautiful.
Can I say I actually like this cover a little more than the first 2 covers,
I
even though
really
I
like
love
it.
those covers. When I
Yeah.
saw it, I was like, "Oh my god, it's perfect."
Yeah.
But I
The green.
basically and that's to my cover designer,
Yes.
James Egan. He's amazing. And I showed him my other books, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"I need it to blend in," because I'm like you, and I even was like, "I just don't want it to look like it's not even part of the series," because
Yeah.
frequently that will happen. The
Mm.
first 2 books will be one way, and then maybe the 3rd and 4th book could be a
Yeah.
totally different series because it's a different style. So that was really important to me because I know people who collect paperbacks,
Yeah.
like, they collect their little collector items. They want them to sit on their shelf,
Yeah.
and they want them to look pretty and match, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. But no, it's beautiful, and I know I could
Thanks.
tell that you really paid attention to that.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's really for anybody who's thinking of publishing, it is really aside from, like, the content, you have to have
mhm.
good quality, like you said, edited content. The cover, though, is what gets you that first impression. We all
Yeah.
say don't judge a book by a cover, but
No,
everybody
but we
does.
do.
Especially when you're online shopping and you have that little thumbnail, like, that's what catches attention, so
Oh, yeah.
that is, like, one of the most important things now
Yeah. I
to do.
mean, I always like to think that, I'm giving books time of day, but the reality is I open up my email from BookBub in the morning and you just kind of flip through and your
Mhm.
just eyes are just kind of skimming until you see a cover that catches your interest. Like
Yeah,
that. I mean, that's the reality.
yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, cover is huge marketing, huge.
I would even go so far to say that the back cover blurb needs to be different in an online environment
Yeah.
than when you can pick it up and look at the back of like browsing a bookstore,
Yeah.
because you're already sort of invested. Once you pick that book up in a bookstore, you can read a long blurb, an ebook, or even if you're just ordering online, you're scrolling
Mhm.
through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever it is you get your books. That blurb needs to be extra punchy,
Yeah.
because you look at the cover, then you look at the blurb, and decisions are made a lot quicker because it's a lot easier to scroll away than putting back that book that's already in your hand to look at. So it's a really
Yeah.
different environment when you're selling in an online storefront, or a
Yeah.
BookBub app or something like that.
So how do you balance that? How are you finding that between you have most your books right now are traditional, but then you have, like you said, re-released your Copper Air series. You now have The Dove and the Rogue. Like how do you balance the two?
There is no balancing really. You just gotta go with day by day what fire needs to be put out that
Yeah.
day. So I'm pretty new to that balance. I would say a year into it. So I'm still looking
Mhm.
for that. I definitely work better when I can write sort of in a vacuum. So
Yeah.
I think what I've been leaning more toward lately is having chunks of weeks to write and
Mhm.
then chunks of weeks where I do the marketing and planning and all the admin stuff that you have to do.
I hear that. I hear that. Yeah, it's hard. It's one of those things where they say, like, you always have to put your writing first. You have to put your writing first. My brain can't handle it. Like, when I know I have other things to do, like, I can't
Yeah.
focus on my writing.
Yeah.
It's just like I have to get those done to, like, clear my mental space so I can then focus on the writing, and
Right.
I wish that I could just block it all out. I wish so
Right.
much. But
Well, that's like
yeah.
people say,
Mm,
don't pick up your phone, don't do email first
yeah.
thing in the morning, just write. But I'm kind of that
Mhm.
way too. I'm like, but I have
Yeah.
to get those out of the way so I
Yeah.
can focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Different things work for different people.
And the
Mhm.
problem is it always changes. What works for
It
you for a
does.
year might not work for you next year.
It does. I mean, I feel like every book I've written, certainly not as many as you, but everyone has just been, like, different.
It is. I say every single time I started writing a book, I have to like reteach myself how to write a
Yeah.
book. I'm always like, why did I think I could write a book? Like, dude, like, how do I do this again? Like, it's always just that
No.
challenge. And I guess that's good because I'm trying to change up the books
Yeah.
so it's not the same thing every
Right.
time.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want it to become just completely rote, I guess, but it'd be
Yeah.
nice if it was maybe a little
I,
easier.
I need
I
to
don't
challenge myself less, maybe. I don't know.
I always have a moment, well, multiple moments, I guess, where I'm just like, "What gives you the audacity to think that anyone wants to read anything you
I
have to
know.
say?"
I know. And then always about 60% in, I'm like, "Why did I think this was a good story? Why did
I
I think
know.
this was worth writing down?"
I know. But the thing is, people enjoy them. And
Yeah,
in a world where, like we said, the market is changing, we don't know what's happening, we don't know what's going on. And so I just tell myself, write the book that you want to read, and hopefully other people will too.
yes, exactly. Especially with, historical romance, as we
Hmm.
said earlier, sort of evolving, but you wanna keep that core of what makes
Yeah.
historical romance readers just
Yes.
grow up with your book, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think that's one thing I did different in The Dove and the Road because The Stranger I Wed and Eliza and the Duke both had really sort of big subplots.
Hmm.
The romance to me is always the main plot,
Hmm.
but, there was, sort of a women's rights angle in the
Yeah.
first book, and
Yep.
he was trying to get the health bill passed, and in the second book, her hero is from Whitechapel, and
Hmm.
he's a boxer, and
Yep.
he's got this bad guy after him that is trying to, get money out of him and is trying to get
Mm.
away from him. So there's that, which I kinda considered it my adventure book. It was a little bit
Little
of a
adventure.
harken
Yeah.
back to my
Hmm.
Wild West books where you had the bad guys and the good guys.
Yep.
So that was fun. But The Dove and the Rogue was just different because, we'd seen Jenny and David all the way
Hmm.
through the first 2
Yeah.
books kind of circling each other.
Yeah.
And their, reasons for not wanting to be together were more internal.
Yes.
So that created a sort of gentler, more intimate story, I think, where we're just focused on them for most of the book,
Mm.
and I really enjoyed that, and I don't read many reviews, but people tag me, and I have to admit, I do read some of the NetGalley reviews before the book comes out just to see if it's landing
Yeah.
with people. But I think that resonated with,
Mhm.
some of the core historical romance readers because that's
I
what we look for in
loved it.
books, you know?
I loved it. But yeah, no, it was
Mhm.
great. We want that romance.
I know,
Yeah.
and we have to keep that center no matter what we do
Mhm.
going forward, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right for sure. But well, what's next for you if you know? Like, are you happy to keep self-publishing if that's the avenue? Are you hoping to get back with trad? Are you looking to pivot? Like, what are your plans?
Ideally, I would do both,
Mhm.
some trad books and then some that
Mhm.
I put out myself, because I really do think for the historical romance
Mhm.
market, I'm liking the, self-published route. I
Mhm.
like the more access to readers. I like being able to
Mhm.
control a little more what I give them. So definitely I would keep that. And I have sort of an idea I'm playing around with that's a little bit of a historical romance, paranormal maybe. I don't
Ooh.
know if it will see the light of day, but I've written a couple
Yeah.
chapters just to see how I like it.
That's
And then
great.
definitely a pivot for the trad because I've
Mhm,
written a book that I have on submission now. It is not historical at all.
mhm.
It's more of a cozy fantasy because I've been reading a lot of those lately
Yeah.
and rom-coms because I
Mhm.
just with everything going on in the world, you can kinda curl up and escape from the
Yep.
world.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't read as much historical romance anymore because it's not an escape because I write so much of it.
I know.
But I do have,
Yeah.
sometimes that special book. Like, I do like to read them
Mhm.
because I just love historicals.
Yeah,
It's finding for me that balance coming up in
for
the next
sure.
year or 2.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what else you put out. You've got so many great books already.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me on
Thank you. I
and
thank you so
talking
much for
historical
joining
romance.
today. Yeah, we're gonna keep I firmly believe, I don't know when, I hope it's soon, but it will come back around. We know that things cycle in terms of popularity, and
We do.
this is not our moment, but it's gonna come back around.
I do, and I think it's gonna be better than ever. And I do think we're gonna see us expand into more time periods. Like you said, you were seeing more
Mhm,
of the early 20th century.
mhm.
And if I could write in any other time period, it would be the 1920s because you have that same sort of thing you do with the Gilded Age with
Yeah,
the social issues and
yes.
then, the thriving nightlife and prohibition and all of that.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to see what people are going to start producing as far as
Yeah.
20th century historical romance goes.
Me too. And if any of you need a place, I want your books. Well, thank you so, so, so much for joining me today, Harper. I've really enjoyed talking with you. I absolutely loved the Doves in New York series. I'm excited to go back and read your Western now. I was planning to before we chatted, and I just, life. But
Too many books, so little
yeah.
time.
Yeah. Only so much time, but I'm very excited to read them. I'm glad that you uplifted them today. And I'm so glad that you did push forward and release this book on your own. And everyone, go and
Yes.
read The Dove and the Rogue. It is out now. Read the entire series. It's fantastic. And like I said, all that information will be below. So have a wonderful rest of your day, Harper. And everyone, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time when we read The Bride by Julie Garwood. So join
Oh,
us for that.
yay.
Yay. All right. Bye.
Thanks.